Hey everybody, Josh here with Boris Effect, and today I'm going to go over Vegas Pro's AI Z-Depth effect. It's a massive overhaul to the original Z-Depth effect, so let's see what's new with it. We can easily create some really cool effects with just a few simple clicks. This effect uses our AI models to intelligently create depth from your footage. We can customize how it looks with a wide variety of parameters, which allow you to create some really cool effects that would have normally taken you hours to do, all within Vegas Pro. So let's dive in and create a few things. Okay, so we're inside Vegas Pro, and I have a couple clips on here already. We have an office scene with just me inside of my office pointing, and we're going to be using this clip to make text fly behind my chair. I also have another scene of somebody walking down a path in a forest, which we're going to add some volumetric fog to. So let's dive in it. Find and click your video effects tab, then go up to the artificial intelligence / machine learning tab, and you'll see all of the AI tools. Z-Depth is at the bottom, and we have a few presets here, but we're going to drag the default onto our first clip, the office scene. You can see the default preset does a pretty good job of chopping out the background and leaving me in my chair. We see a little bit of flickering and whatnot, but we can go ahead and work through these parameters to fix that. Now at the top here, we do have the mode to choose from, which is normalized and absolute values. The difference here is a little bit subtle, but normalized values remap the entire depth range of your scene from nearest to furthest in a 0 to 1 scale. When we change to absolute values, this actually represents the AI's calculated distance from the camera to the object surface on a 0 to 10 scale. For this shot, I'm going to stick with absolute values. We see by default we have a transparency box. If we uncheck this, we're actually seeing what's in the background, even though I am still being masked by this effect. I'll show you a really cool reason for this checkbox here in a little bit. So for right now, we are going to keep it checked so I can see what my mask is, so I can help refine it. Below here, we have a mask effects button, which if this is checked, you're going to see the subject and what's cut around behind you. If we uncheck this, you're actually just going to see a black and white matte of what Z-Depth is masking. So I'm going to keep this checked for this scene. And now we have our sliders. The furthest and the nearest sliders are the parameters which allow you to tell the AI what the furthest and the nearest depths that you want it to consider. So right now, from the scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the closest to the camera, 0 being the closest to the background, it's not detecting anything in the background because it's automatically choosing me as the foreground mask. But if I were to drag this up, you'll see that I'm increasing the background of what I'm telling the AI is, and so now it's not getting my chair the higher I go with here. But if I drag this back down, it's going to open that back up and get more of the background. If I drag nearest downward, it's going to stop getting me and allow me to only select things in the middle ground. So it's masking out things that are above a value of 7 and below a value of 2 in this example. But I want me to be in this shot completely, so I'm going to drag this to 10. And we'll keep furthest around 3 or 4 for right now, which we'll go over there. We'll adjust these parameters a little bit later. When it comes to depth in and depth out sliders, this is where it allows you to fade in and out your mask based upon a few parameters. So if we start sliding some things around, we'll see that it's now softly fading the mask in instead of it being so harsh of a line right here. We can drag this back down as well and then bring this back up, and we'll see that it's a pretty nice fade. Now, this isn't the best example for the depth in and depth out, so I'm going to show you the path shot real quick. So for this example, I'm going to keep it on normalized, but I'm going to lower my depth in slider, and you're going to see it's going to kind of fade in and ease in the mask that it's selecting. If I bring up my depth out, it's going to increase that feathery range and that soft range all the way towards the camera. So going back to the office shot, I don't want that much feathering like I had in the path scene. So I'm just going to set my depth in and out to a specified point. Let's just say 4 for right now. And that's going to be pretty good for the moment. I like that. Down below, we have the invert checkbox. It's checked by default, and I am selected as the mask at the moment. But if I uncheck it, it selects the background. This helps if you want to apply effects to the mask or to everything except the mask. So right now, I'm going to keep this checked so I can see me, but not my background. And then we have the map finesse group down here. This group helps you refine your mask. It has 3 parameters inside of here. The first one is nearest object only. So I'm going to pause this here and show you. If we were to check this box, AI is going to automatically try to figure out what the closest thing in your scene is and then map that specifically. So like if I check this box, it realizes that these 2 dots right beside my face are in fact the background, and it will take those out of the mask. And that can make a much cleaner mask, which is nice. But there is something you want to watch out for. If I scrub through and I realize that my arm disappears right there. Why did it do that? It's because my arm separated from my body outside of the frame. So if I uncheck this, you'll see it separates by a couple of pixels, and that's all the AI needs to know to think that that arm is not a part of my body. So depending on your shot, this can help clean up a lot of the outside masks, but for my shot, I'm going to leave it unchecked. Next, we have the feather slider, which helps smooth the edge of the mask. So if we start dragging that to the right, we'll see that the mask gets smoother and it's not as jagged and harsh. You can push this slider all the way to 1, and you'll see that it really fades in this mask big time. And then if you wanted, you can even hold the shift key and drag this all the way to 2. And this helps for certain scenes like we're going to show in the path shot. But for this shot where I'm putting text behind my chair, I need it to be a little bit more precise. So I'm going to drag it down to 0.02, looks pretty good to me. That's still keeping it pretty sharp, but also blending it enough to not be harsh. Finally, down here, we have auto feather, which is exactly that. On a per frame basis, the AI is going to automatically feather what it thinks looks best. So if I click that, we're going to see that it blends in. It's probably using something a little bit more like 0.1 or 0.2, you could tell. The benefit of using auto feather is that it can dynamically change per frame, whereas if you manually choose the feathering, it's going to be that set number every single frame across your whole shot. So I'm actually going to stick with auto feather for this one. And then finally down below we have the visualizations. By default it's on none, but if we drop that down we see 2 options. Threshold to depth, which we're going to choose. And in this mode you see what AI sees as the masked object based upon your parameters that you've chosen, furthest, nearest, depth in, and depth out. It shows it in a very colorful heat map-like view, which is really easy for you to see. So the things that are in the darker red are closer to your camera, what the AI thinks, and the things that are blue are further away. And if you have your mouse around, you can see a little number beside your mouse cursor, and that'll show you what the AI thinks the depth is based on that specific pixel or area. Lastly, underneath here, we also have a depth visualization, which shows you a depth map of what the AI thinks the depth is in the scene. This visualization could come in handy, but you won't be in this mode that much because the best visualization mode to be in is thresholded depth. Because in this one, as you'll notice at the top, we have a sentence that says, drag a selection frame to identify your foreground object. Identify additional areas to refine your selection and add more objects. What does that mean? Okay, well, let's check this out. So I want to refine myself the best I can so that when the text flies by, it's not actually going behind anything in the background. So I'm going to start scrubbing through my footage from the first frame. My ultimate goal is to make sure me and the chair are the only things selected. We will have a couple of stray selections here, like around my arm, but that's okay. So if I zoom in and I click and drag in the video preview, I'm telling the AI, hey, this is my foreground, right? Hey, this head, that's my foreground. So we'll start with the closest part to the scene that you're identified. So my face, I'm absolutely the closest. I'm going to select my entire face and body and this chair. Now the AI is like, okay, cool, that's the foreground. Got it. But I want to be a little bit more accurate. No, this part of the chair is also the foreground. So is this part of the chair and that part of the chair. And now it's got a really good understanding of what the foreground is and what the background is. So now we start scrubbing through and we look for wherever it deselects the chair. Okay, right here, this part. Okay, so I'm seeing that the chair gets a little deselected here. I'm gonna make sure I refine it a bit more. Cool. We can see the parameters change as I click and refine. Okay, cool. So the chair is really good. I think it's in a good spot. So how do I get text in between my chair and the background? If I uncheck transparency, then I have just my background and my foreground, but I can't get anything in between that. So I'm going to duplicate this scene specifically. Right click on the timeline. So I'm going to insert a new video track, select my scene, hold control, and then drag it up. That duplicates it. And now I am going to rename this track over here to my foreground, and I'm going to rename this track background. That'll help me keep things organized. And in my foreground, I'm going to keep the mask that I've refined there. I'm going to select it and I'll make sure I turn transparency on. So if I mute this track, I now have nothing in the background. So this is specifically a track for foreground. I'm going to unmute the bottom background track, go to its effects and delete the AIZ depth effect. So it's just a clean palette, right? I now have a masked version of me over a clean palette. That means I can insert one more video track, right click on the bottom background, insert a video track. Now I have a gap in between my foreground and my background. I'm going to go to the media generator and let's just choose some titles and text. Drag one in between these clips. And then ta-da! We have a background, text, and then we have a masked foreground. This is officially getting text behind the selected subject. Now I'm going to change the font and animate this text to go from left to right following my finger point. And now let's see what that looks like. The text flies right behind my chair, just as intended. One thing I do want to show you before I get to adding the fog in this path scene is that you can actually add effects to unmasked areas on the clip that has Z-depth applied to it. So I'm going to mute the text clip as well as the background clip. And now we're back to just my clip that has the Z-depth on it. I'm going to open up the Z-depth effect and I'm going to uncheck transparency. And now I'm going to go ahead and add an effect. Let's go with like maybe video. We'll do a blur and then maybe a Gaussian or Gaussian blur, maybe add a soften, right? So if I take this video effect and drag it onto my effects chain before the Z-depth effect, let's see what happens. Now my masked subject, everything I specified in the parameter, is not being affected by the video effect that is before it in the chain. So I've added some blur to the background. Maybe we change this to 0.01. And if we go back to Z-depth, if we uncheck invert, just the selected mask gets the effect behind it, and the background does not. That's just something quick I wanted to show you for really easy, quick blurring of backgrounds if you wanted to do that. Now let's move on to the path scene. In this scene, the person's walking down a path. We're going to add scary, dramatic fog only in the back half of the scene. We're going to keep the front half unaffected. Let's open back up the video effects. We have Z-depth, and I'm going to enable it. And so right off the bat, without even changing many parameters, it looks really good. So to add some sort of effect to just the unmasked area, we can go to our transparency checkbox and uncheck it. This brings back our full scene while keeping the mask. We'll go over to our video effects on the left and maybe search for something like fog or smoke. Then we have a cool continuum smoke effect. I'm going to drag that to before the Z-depth effect on my chain. And now we have volumetric smoke being applied and faded in based upon the mask and the parameters we've chosen. And we can always refine our Z-depth mask by going back to the effect, turning back on transparency, and then making adjustments here. One adjustment I did want to make is to smooth in the edges with our map finesse. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to see what happens if I check nearest object only. And we can see it's not making too much of a difference. So I'm going to uncheck that. And I'm going to change the feather and bring that out all the way to 1. And I'm actually going to hold shift and bring that to 2. That's going to really smooth the transition of mask right here. Now we can see what it looks like in the thresholded depth visualization. And so anything that doesn't look like a heat map is not going to be selected. If you wanted to see what this looked like with the depth map itself, that looks pretty cool as well. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to change my visualization back to none. And now if I uncheck transparency, I have the smoke and fog effect coming through looking really good. I could even change this to something really cool, like maybe the color to a really scary red, right? So simply adjusting a few parameters based upon what your scene is, you can make some really cool effects using Z-depth. There's so many cool things you can create with the new AI Z-depth effect, and I'm excited to see what you come up with. Be sure to drop me a comment with what you'd like to see more of in the future. And thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video.